are sights you can wipe from memory overnight. But there are others that carve so deep you wish you had never laid eyes on them. That morning, in Portland's thick fog, I saw one of those sights, and it changed the rhythm of my heart forever. My name is Michael Hayes. I'm 58, a retired carpenter. After the death of my wife, Anna, 4 years ago, I've lived alone in a small wooden cabin on the edge of Forest Park. I built that cabin myself, a gift for her while she was alive. Now it's only the creak of old floorboards that keeps me company, and the one habit that holds me upright: walking the forest trail each morning. People say time dulls pain. They're wrong. Pain doesn't go anywhere. It just lies quiet inside you, like a crack waiting for the moment you slip and it splits wide open. And that morning, the crack tore open. I turned into the familiar bend where a great oak stood alone above a carpet of rotting leaves. The hour was early, the ground still dim, only streaks of gray light filtering through the canopy. Then I heard it, a rasping sound, harsh and broken, like metal scraping bark, tangled with shallow, jagged breaths. In the army, I'd heard the drag of chains across dirt. It always meant captivity. And this time, it did too. My heart hammered as I stepped closer, and then I saw it. A Doberman pup, no more than 4 months old, was tied tight to the oak. A gray nylon rope wrapped around its neck and body, pulling so close its small frame seemed pressed into the rough bark. Its front legs shook, blood oozing from deep grooves where the rope bit into flesh. Its fur, black and tan, was soaked and matted with mud. But what froze me was the belly. It bulged grotesquely, round and hard as a swollen gourd, tipping the little body sideways. I stepped nearer, and in an instant, my old trade instincts flared. I had seen bellies like this on the battlefield, soldiers with fluid filling the abdomen, or worse, tumors pressing from within. But this wasn't a soldier. This was a small, abandoned creature condemned to suffer a slow death. At its feet lay a scrap of paper, rain-soaked and plastered to the ground. I bent, lifted it. The ink had run, but the words were still legible, scrawled in black marker, "Won't make it through the week." I had witnessed unfair deaths. I had seen brothers fall in combat without a chance to say goodbye. But never before had I seen someone write a death sentence for an animal while it was still breathing. I looked at the pup. No pleading in its eyes, no cries, no howls. Just a hollow stare, drained of hope, as if it believed the words were true, as if it had been convinced that its own existence was meaningless. A wave of anger rose in me. Anger at the hands that bound it, anger at the cruel scrawl of those words, and anger at myself, for in that first instant I hesitated, as though part of me had accepted that cruel judgment. I don't remember the exact moment I dropped to my knees. Only the stench of rain, of wet fur, of blistered skin under rope. My hands trembled as I tugged at the cord, hearing the slice against raw flesh. The bloated belly heaved with each shallow breath, so weak I thought it might stop at any second. One thought cut through, cold and sharp. If I walk away, it means I agree it isn't worth saving. And in that moment I swore I would never let those words come true. I pressed closer to the oak. The gray nylon rope wound around like a snare, pinning that small body tight against the rough bark. Its tiny neck was raw, streaked with blood where the fur had matted red. The frame was gaunt, ribs standing out like the slats of a basket, yet the belly bulged grotesquely, swollen so tight that the dim morning light glistened off the stretched skin beneath the thin coat. At a glance, someone untrained might think it had simply overeaten. But I knew better. This was no full stomach. This was abnormal swelling. Something had taken root inside that pup's belly. A tumor, a large cyst, or fluid building from infection. Left untreated, it would rupture, turn septic, and kill it slowly, painfully. I clenched the rain-soaked scrap of paper in my hand. The shaky, scrawled words dripped with cruelty. Won't make it through the week. Not a medical warning. Not a note from someone who cared. It was a sentence. The naked malice of a hand that tied this animal here to die. I leaned closer. Its breathing was ragged, each rise of its belly carrying a faint hiss, like wind through a narrow crack. Its eyes, they weren't a puppy's eyes. No brightness, no curiosity, only a tired, hollow depth, as if it had long since stopped expecting anything from human beings. For an instant, my foot wanted to retreat. A part of me whispered, "It's too much, too dangerous, too late." But then another part answered louder, fierce, "If you turn away, you stand with the one who wrote those words." I dropped to my knees and pulled out my pocket knife. The rope was so tight that the blade screeched as it cut through. Each loop I freed made the pup tremble, but it never fought, never growled. It stood still, like a soul resigned to fate. And that quiet surrender made my chest ache. I remembered the battlefield years ago. I had wrapped bandages around boys of 19, 20, as they stared at me with eyes emptied of hope, no longer believing the medevac would arrive in time. This pup's eyes were the same, and I knew, if I walked away, it wouldn't live to see another chance. When the final loop gave way, its body collapsed to the ground. I lunged forward, catching it in my arms. It was frightening, so light I could feel every bone beneath the soaked fur, yet the belly was hard as stone, pressing heavy against my chest. A foul stench rose up, wet fur mingled with the sour tang of infection. It didn't howl, didn't bark, didn't bite. Just a faint sigh slipped from its chest. The sound of a spirit too tired of existing. I held it closer, pulling my thick coat over its body for warmth. My hands shook, not from cold but from rage. Rage that someone had bound it here on purpose, left it to fade away. Rage that the little creature had believed it. I looked once more at the paper, the words blurred by rain but still cutting sharp. Won't make it through the week. And right then, a thought as cold as steel cut through me. Then we'll prove them wrong. It will make it. It will live. I lifted the pup, its stone-hard belly pressing against my ribs, its faint breath brushing the side of my neck. I turned and strode out of the damp forest, my boots crushing the carpet of rotten leaves with a brittle snap. Each step beat like a drum in my chest. No delay, no surrender, no letting those words come true. I held the pup tight in my arms, running down the trail blanketed with rotting leaves. The morning fog slapped my face, sharp and cold, but my chest burned as if fire had taken hold inside. I could hear every shallow breath in that tiny body, so faint I feared it might slip away at any moment. My truck wasn't far, an old silver-blue Chevrolet that had carried me for nearly a decade. I yanked the door open and laid the pup on the passenger seat, still wrapped in my heavy coat. Its eyes cracked open, staring into empty space ahead. No recognition, no curiosity, not even fear, just a hollow vacancy. I turned the key. The engine roared, tires crunching on gravel. One place filled my mind. Celeste Monroe's veterinary clinic, tucked in a small neighborhood west of Portland, just past the old gas station I'd driven by hundreds of times. I'd known Celeste for years, back when she was still an intern. She had been Anna's closest friend. It was Celeste who helped us say goodbye to Rusty, our old dog, easing him into peace only months before Anna died. I never thought I'd be begging her for another mercy. As I drove, I kept glancing at the seat beside me. That swollen belly rose beneath the coat, each labored breath making it quiver like an overinflated balloon about to burst. My jaw clenched, fingers locked so hard on the wheel that my knuckles turned white. One thought circled over and over in my head. Don't give up, kid. We're not done yet. When the faded wooden sign of Monroe Veterinary Clinic came into view beside the peeling gas station, I slammed the brakes, jumped out, and carried the pup inside. The bell over the door jingled, the familiar smell of antiseptic rushing in. Celeste looked up from her desk and her face froze. Good Lord, Michael. What is this? I laid the pup on the cold steel table. It lay still, eyes half shut, belly swollen like a silent cry for help. From my pocket, I pulled out the crumpled paper and set it beside it. Celeste read, and for the first time, I saw fury in her eyes. Won't make it through the week. Someone left it to die like this? I nodded. I found it tied to an oak in Forest Park. Celeste slid on gloves and snapped on the exam light. Her hands were quick, but her voice was tight. The abdomen is abnormally firm. It could be a large cyst, a tumor, or fluid buildup. Infection might have spread already. Without surgery, it doesn't stand a chance. Her words cut like a blade. And with surgery? She looked at me over fogged glasses. The risks are enormous. This is a puppy, Michael. It's malnourished, and its immune system is almost gone. Surgery could take it right there on the table. Silence thickened the room. Only the rattle of the heater and the pup's faint breathing broke it. I stared down at its small legs, trembling lightly. It didn't beg. It didn't resist. That quiet surrender nearly choked me. Celeste's voice softened. Michael, sometimes the most merciful thing is to let them go peacefully. No one would blame you. My fist clenched tight. The words on that paper burned in my mind. Won't make it through the week. And then I heard Anna's voice, like an echo from the past. Her words the day we saved a stray cat with a broken leg. We don't always win, but if we don't try, we lose for sure. I lifted my head, voice hoarse but firm. Well, lucky for this one, Celeste. I'm not everyone else. Celeste studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Resolve replaced hesitation in her eyes. She turned to the nurse on duty. Prep the surgery room, light anesthesia. 4th line, abdominal set. We go now. I stepped back, my heart pounding like war drums. I had faced death more times than I could count, but never had my hands trembled like this, because this time the enemy wasn't armed. It was the quiet suffocation of a life too small to fight for itself, and I swore, with everything left in me, whatever happened, I would never let those words come true again. Celeste and the nurse hurried the pup into the small surgery room in the back. I stayed outside, peering through the square window in the door. The harsh, fluorescent light poured down on the steel table, throwing every detail of that small frame, that terrifyingly swollen belly, into sharp relief. I heard Celeste's voice. Light anesthesia only. It's too weak. Prep the IV line. Abdominal set. The door swung shut. I sat down on the bench in the hall, fingers clamped around the crumpled scrap of paper in my pocket. Every second dragged like an hour. The clatter of instruments, the steady beep of the monitor, all of it echoed back like sounds from a battlefield long ago. I had sat beside comrades, counting their heartbeats until the helicopter came too late. But I had never felt as powerless as I did now. On the battlefield, at least, I could press bandages, give blood, and keep someone awake. Here, I could only wait, while a fragile life fought alone on a cold table. Through the window, I saw Celeste bent over, sweat dotting her brow. Her voice was quick, urgent. There's a mass. Almost the size of an orange. beginning dissection. I heard the cut of scissors, the snap of clamps, the suction pulling. Yellow fluid drained out, enough for me to grasp the gravity of it. My chest clenched. I whispered, as if speaking to Anna, "You see this?" I didn't leave it. I won't let another life be sentenced just because someone decided it wasn't worth saving. Then the monitor shrieked with a long, flat tone. My heart seized. For a second, I thought it was over. But then the line flickered back, weak, fragile, but beating. I shot to my feet, sweat dripping cold down my temples. Never had a faint beep carried so much weight. Nearly 2 hours passed before the door opened. Celeste stepped out, pulling down her mask, her face drained with exhaustion. "We got it out." Heavier than I thought. A cystic tumor, already infected. The abdominal cavity is cleaned, and the incision is closed. It survived the surgery. But now comes the real test. It has to choose to live. I nodded, throat too tight to speak. I followed her into recovery. Shadow lay there on a green mat, a thin IV line in its leg. The small body trembled lightly, eyes shut, belly wrapped in fresh bandages. Each breath stretched thin as a thread. Celeste laid a hand on my shoulder. "Michael, now it's down to its will. You can stay here, but don't hope too much. Its body is nearly gone." I pulled a plastic chair close and sat beside it. My chest ached as I looked down at that frail body. I had held the hands of young soldiers as they slipped away. I had held Anna's hand in the hospital when the heart monitor fell silent. But staring at this pup, I felt a new kind of fear. The fear of being too late once again. From my bag, I pulled out a small container of chicken broth I'd made yesterday. Anna had always believed that every creature needed the warmth of a kitchen to find its way back to life. I poured a little into the lid, let it cool, then steadied a small spoon. I held it close to Shadow's muzzle, whispering, "Listen, kid. If you want to stay, just give me one sign. One lick is enough." The room was silent. Only the soft beeping of the monitor and the rasp of heavy breaths filled it. My hand shook as I held the spoon still. A minute passed, then 2. Despair began to creep in, and then a small movement. The wet nose twitched, a longer breath slipped out, and finally, the tongue brushed the spoon, just once, trembling, but real. Tears welled up and spilled down my face. I bowed my head and whispered, "That's it? You've chosen life?" Celeste stood motionless in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth. Her voice shook. "Michael, that gesture is worth more than any medicine." I didn't answer. I just sat there, hands trembling, knowing that a battle had just begun, and Shadow, the pup condemned to die, had just fought back in the simplest way. It chose to stay. From the moment its tongue brushed that spoonful of broth, I knew I couldn't leave. I all but camped in Celeste's little recovery room. By day, I sat beside the steel crate, whispering its name. By night, I pulled a plastic chair close, rested my head on folded arms, and drifted off to the slow, steady beeps of the monitor. Shadow ate, drop by drop, spoon by spoon. The belly was lighter after surgery, but the rest of its body was brittle as a twig. Each time it tried to lift its head, I held my breath as if the whole world depended on that one small motion. On the 3rd day, I walked in and saw its ears twitch. Not much, just a faint stir at the sound of my boots on the floor. But to me, it was like a bell ringing life back. I dropped my bag, bent down, and whispered softly, "I'm here, kid. I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, I tried bringing thin rice porridge. At first, it turned its head away. I didn't push. I just sat down, set the bowl in front, and started telling it about Anna. I told how she once laughed herself to tears watching me jump at a mouse in the kitchen, how we drove across Oregon just to watch autumn leaves fall. I don't know how much it understood, but when I fell silent, its head shifted. Slowly, it licked the porridge, spoon by spoon. I nearly broke down right there. Celeste came in, caught sight of it, her eyes shining. "Michael, it's not just eating. It's beginning to trust." On the 5th day, when I opened the door, Shadow wasn't lying still anymore. It pushed up on its front legs, lifted its head, and those dark eyes were wide, brighter than when I first saw them. Its small tail flickered. For the first time, it wagged. Not strong, not steady, just a faint stir like a passing breeze. But I understood. It was a signal. I wasn't a stranger anymore. I was an anchor. I reached into the crate, not touching, just holding my hand close. It looked, hesitated, then pressed its muzzle against my palm. Its breath was weak, but warm. That warmth shot straight into my chest. This creature, once sentenced, "won't make it through the week," had chosen to place its faith in me. From that day, I gave it a new name, Shadow. Not only because it was dark as a shadow, but because it followed at every step, quiet and steady. I leaned close and whispered, "You're my shadow, but you're also the reason I keep walking." Day by day, Shadow grew stronger. Its fur is less tangled, its eyes less clouded. It still trembled at the clang of dropped metal, still panted when footsteps rushed in. But by my side, it calmed. One late evening, when the clinic glowed only in yellow lamplight, I sat reading one of Anna's old books. Shadow curled in the crate, head resting on the blanket. My rough voice carried through the quiet room as I read aloud. Halfway through, I glanced up and found it staring at me, unblinking, as if listening. For the first time, its eyes held not only darkness, but a faint light. Celeste came in, arms folded, watching us. She smiled. "You know, Michael, medicine can't always do this. But what you're doing, that's the only thing keeping it here." I nodded gently. I understood. The spoons of porridge, the broth, the stories, they weren't just care. They were a promise. You are no longer abandoned. You have someone. For years after Anna's death, I lived like a ghost. But every day beside Shadow, I realized I wasn't just saving it, it was saving me too. With its silence, its fragility, and that small but extraordinary choice, to trust again. 1 week after the surgery, Shadow could finally stand on all 4 legs. He was still thin, still trembling at unfamiliar sounds, but his eyes had changed. In those dark eyes now glimmered a stubborn spark, like a small flame that would not be put out. Celeste came over, removing the IV line for the last time. She looked at me, her voice gentle but firm. "Michael, he's stable now. You can take him home. But remember, he needs quiet. He needs safety. He cannot live in fear anymore." I nodded, my heart both relieved and heavy. The truth was, the apartment I rented downtown didn't allow dogs. For weeks I had pushed the thought aside, but now there was no hiding from it. Shadow couldn't go back to alleys and darkness, nor could he survive in a cramped, 4-walled space. He needed open sky, and maybe I did too. I carried him into the truck. Rain drizzled, drops streaking the windshield. Shadow curled into an old blanket, his head resting on Anna's pillow, which I still kept there. I drove slowly, thinking hard. In the rearview mirror, I caught his eyes fixed on the window. Not fear this time, but something else. like he was testing the world opening before him. That night, I opened my laptop. I sat for hours scrolling through listings on the outskirts of town. I didn't need a big house, just a patch of grass, a wooden fence, a place where morning light could slip through the windows. At last, I found it. A small weathered cottage on the edge of Beaverton, paint faded, backyard wild with weeds. A fixer-upper, they called it, but when I saw the pictures, it looked like a chance to begin again. 3 days later, I signed the lease, and on a misty morning, I brought Shadow there. I set him down in the yard. He stood still, quivering slightly, eyes sweeping the space. Wind rustled through the trees and the weeds stirred. No rope biting into flesh. No darkness. No metallic scrape against skin. Only soft earth under his paws and wide sky above. He turned to me as if asking, "Is this real? Am I allowed?" I smiled, nodded. "Go on, Shadow. This is yours." And then he ran. Not the faltering steps of recovery, not the hollow-eyed retreat of a creature broken. He ran in circles through the yard, paws tearing through grass, ears flying in the wind, tail high. A bark burst out, weak but full of life. A declaration. "I'm here. I live." I stood frozen, my chest tight. For the first time since Anna died, my tears weren't for sorrow. They were for joy, raw, unpolished, uncontainable. Shadow stopped in the middle of the yard, panting, tongue lolling. He looked at me, and this time, his gaze wasn't that of something abandoned. It was the gaze of a fighter who had reclaimed his life. I stepped down from the porch and called softly, "Good boy." He ran to me, not from fear, but by choice. He pressed against my leg, panting, trembling with excitement. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around him. I felt his heartbeat racing against mine. And right then, I understood. This wasn't just a dog that had been saved. This was living proof of a simple truth people often forget, that even when the world writes you off with a death sentence, you can tear it to pieces if someone believes you deserve to live. I leaned close, my voice hoarse in his ear. "You weren't just saved, Shadow. You saved me too." In that moment, with the Portland wind sweeping through the grass, I knew a new chapter had begun for both of us. Spring in Portland slowly warmed. The grass in the yard grew thick and green, and wildflowers pushed up along the old wooden fence. Shadow had filled out, his black and tan coat sleek in the morning sun. But the shadows in him remained. Whenever a truck screeched its brakes on the road, he darted to my legs. Whenever I dropped a cup, he bolted under the table. I understood. Some scars live deep in memory. They never vanish. They only sleep, and we must learn to live alongside them. One Saturday morning, while I was cleaning out the shed, Shadow nosed into an old carton. I thought he was just curious, but then he dragged out something wet, crumpled. When he dropped it at my feet, my chest clenched. It was the paper. That paper. The black words are still faintly visible. "Won't make it through the week." Shadow didn't bark, didn't wag. He just sat, eyes locked on me. In those eyes, I saw memory return. He hadn't forgotten. He remembered the oak, the rope biting into his neck, the sentence written for him, and now he brought it to me, as if asking in silence, "What will we do with this?" I sank onto the porch step, hand trembling as I picked it up. The old rain had blurred the ink, but I could still see the cruelty in every stroke. My chest ached. The yard fell silent, broken only by the wind in the trees. Shadow stayed there, dark eyes never leaving me. I drew a breath, stood, went into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the small lighter I used to burn candles for Anna. I walked back outside, paper in one hand, lighter in the other. I looked down at Shadow. "What do you think, kid?" He stepped forward, placed a paw on the paper, then lifted his eyes to mine. No bark, no wag. I understood. The flame caught, the paper curled, black letters burning to ash. I watched it crumble, drift into the air. And in that moment, I felt I was burning away the weight I'd carried too long, the uselessness, the loss, the belief that my life held no meaning anymore. Shadow pressed his head against my leg. I bent down, stroked his sleek coat, whispered, "No piece of paper will ever define you again. You didn't just survive. You're proof that every life is worth fighting for." That night, I printed a photo. Shadow running circles in the yard, ears flying, mouth open in a goofy, radiant smile. I framed it and set it on the wooden table by the door. Beneath it, I wrote in steady, round letters, "Absolutely worth saving." Each morning, passing that picture, I felt my heart reminded me I wasn't alone, reminded me that my existence still had value, so long as I reached out my hand to another. A year passed. Shadow was no longer the pup with the swollen belly, gasping on a steel table. He had become my warrior. He slept with his paws on my old boots, barked when anyone passed the fence, and each morning he jumped on the bed, pressing his head against my chest as if to say, "We're still here." Together, I once thought the best part of my life had ended the day I lost Anna. I believed I was only lingering until time closed in, but then came a creature the world had declared not worth saving. And it taught me a lesson I never expected. No one is meaningless. No one is not worth saving. If you're hearing this story, I hope you remember Shadow. Remember that even when the world turns away, a single hand reaching out can change everything. And if a small dog can forgive, can choose to trust again, then surely we, humans with far greater hearts, can too. For me, Shadow is not just a rescued dog. He is living proof of something simple yet eternal. Every life deserves a second chance. Can you feel it? A creature once tied to a tree, once sentenced to death by a few careless words, now runs free beneath the morning sun. Shadow has shown us all, there is no one, no animal, who is not worth saving. I believe somewhere inside each of us there is a shadow, a life once fragile, once hopeless, waiting only for one outstretched hand to change its fate. And I want to ask you, have you ever saved a dog's life? If you have, share your story in the comments. Let this community hear it, cry with you, and spread more love to the lives still waiting for us. Don't let the dogs out there be abandoned, tied to darkness and loneliness. We can change that, starting with a single story, a single act, a single hand reaching out. If you believe no life is not worth saving, hit subscribe. Join us in building a home where every tear turns into hope, and every story proves that compassion can outlast cruelty. Because sometimes, the only thing it takes to save a life is that you choose to stop.